Oh, I am so grateful to welcome my guest, Chris Blankenship from the Autism Learning Lab. Chris, welcome to Stories from the Field.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we've known each other in different aspects of our lives, and you worked in wilderness therapy for a number of years. How many years were you at Open Sky?
Decade.
8.
Yep.
Wow. So 10 years.
10 years. Getting old.
Well,
Yep.
we're getting Yeah, that's a good thing. And now you're develop customized supports for neurodivergent learners through the Autism Learning Lab, which was fascinating. We talked a little bit at a recent conference about it, but I would like you to share with everybody kind of the overlaps and what brought you to start the Autism Learning Lab.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. So, working at Open Sky, working in the wilderness, we would get a lot of people who came in. I worked primarily with young adults who'd come in and all of a sudden it hit a wall in their life. Had been able to get through middle school, high school, but then for whatever reason, kind of end of high school, beginning of college, had hit a wall and didn't really know why, right? What's going on? And they'd come in and we'd take a look at things and maybe do an assessment, and was finding more and more people were struggling actually with that kind of level 1 autism, not needing a lot of support. People who were able to get through elementary, middle, and high school because, well, they had their friends since they were kids and they had been on the same sports leagues and on the same sports teams and had a lot of support in school. And then all of a sudden things are getting more complicated. Life is getting more complicated. And those autism symptoms really started to creep in. Now they have to make new friends at college, or they're in romantic relationships for the first times, or they're running into a system that is much more rigid than maybe it was in high school or whatever else it was. And so what we were seeing is more and more people coming in with undiagnosed autism. We do a lot of psychological assessments, do a lot of just digging in and questioning, what is this? It's not necessarily just anxiety. It's not necessarily just depression. Really, what we're probably looking at here is autism. And so I was seeing a lot of people come in and get that diagnosis and be diagnosed accurately for the first time in their lives. And they would come back and be like, cool, okay, that makes sense. That's actually really helpful. Now what? And I spent a lot of time researching autism, spent a lot of time working with autistic clients, and spent a lot of time reading the books, reading the websites, reading the academic articles and whatever else. And what I realized is for a lot of people who are being diagnosed with autism for the first time, there's not a real reliable place to get information. There's not a place to go and say like, hey, this is where I can actually learn about what I'm struggling with and what I can do with myself and how I can make progress and how I can actually work on some of these issues. And so I said, I've read all these things. I know all this stuff. I'm good at this. I've been navigating this process with a lot of people over the years. Maybe that's something that I can provide. Maybe that's something that I can do. And so in addition to providing the support and coaching and guidance and opportunities for people who are actually going through that for the first time, really trying to provide high quality education and training for people as well. So not only do you get an autism diagnosis, but now you should understand what that is. You should understand what that isn't. You should understand how it affects your day-to-day life. You should understand what you can do to improve if you want to improve on some of those symptoms. And so that was really the impetus for starting Autism Learning Lab and going through this process that I'm going through now.
And working in a wilderness program, it must have been so inspiring to be able to help a young adult understand what some of their challenges were and educate them. And sometimes I'm assuming they were more receptive to the diagnosis than their parents. I'm like,
Yes.
oh,
Yep.
this makes sense because there isn't all the distractions in wilderness. You were able to help them grieve kind of the losses they may have experienced as an adolescent, and now help them guide them into young adulthood with an awareness of their learning styles and their social skills and things that you need to augment to or scaffold in order for them to be more successful.
Absolutely. And that was a huge part of what we would do, right? Is let's identify what your strengths are. Let's identify what your weaknesses are. Now let's make a plan to move forward. And you're right that there's a grieving process on the Autism Learning Lab website. I have a set of resources, but one of which is an article of first things to do once you get a diagnosis, right? And a lot of it actually is that kind of grieving process and going through the emotions of it and then working through, okay, what do I do from here? But that's something that I guided so many people through. And you're right that a lot of times parents experience more emotions than do their kids. And it's like, how did we miss this? And we did everything we could. And is it our fault? And what if we had done this differently? Would it be? And that grieving process or that learning process that people are going through when they first get a diagnosis, it's not just unique to the individual, it's the whole family system.
I will make sure I put the links in the show notes for the Autism Learning Lab. So important. Resources, education, so critical. Before we dive more into that, can you share like a powerful story from your time in wilderness therapy that shaped your perspective working with young adults, particularly those who are neurodivergent?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many, but one that immediately comes to mind is a young man who had just a whole constellation of issues. He had a parent die, he had some significant stuff happen in his family system. But the reason he came into treatment was actually because of pretty significant opioid addiction. And he was near overdosing a couple of times, starting to get in more and more into fentanyl. It was getting dangerous. And he's someone who's in his like early to mid 20s. And mom's looking at it like, if we don't do something soon, he's going to die. And the way that he was living his life, he was trending in that direction. And pretty quickly in getting to know him, I had it on my radar. It's like, this could very well just be some undiagnosed autism that's underneath everything. Kid who has tremendous verbal acuity, zero interpersonal skills, restricted interests have been intense throughout his life. And it's been the last 5-6 years, really since father had died, that he was really just into substances. And he wasn't just into taking substances. He was really into researching substances and learning about substances. And they were his social outlet because when he was high and everyone else was high, okay, now I'm more comfortable being around people. I'm not good at being around people, but when I'm high, I have a pretty good excuse for not being good at it. And so in so many ways, this is the antithesis of what you might have expected autism to look like, say 15, 20 years ago, where you just expect it to be that, that person who's nerdy and alone and struggling to make connections. Their restricted interest is it's science or it's math or it's trains or it's space or it's whatever. No, like this is a kid who going to school like everyone else, going to parties like everyone else, doing drugs like everyone else, but he's doing it to an extent that is abnormal, right? His interest in it, his awareness of the exact neurochemicals that are being utilized in every substance that he's taking is above and beyond. A lot of that actually happened then right in line with this grief that, of his father dying. And you could easily look at this and say, hey, this is actually some post-traumatic stress. But if you take the whole picture into account, that this is someone who's always actually really struggled socially, who's always had really rigid thinking, who's always had some restricted interests, then you have this big break in his life of his father dying. Now it turns into this really significant substance use. It'd be easy to say this is mental health issues. This is attentional issues. This is grief issues. This is maybe some depression identity issues. But if you really look at the whole picture and you're like, actually what this is autism with all of this stuff piled on top of it. And unless we really understand that foundation of autism, none of these other things are going to work. You can't convince this kid to be sober, right? Because he knows the exact amount of whatever substance he can take in order to be okay because he's researched it more than anyone's researched drugs ever. But he's not good at actually sussing out a social situation and understanding that person who I'm buying drugs from, I can trust. And that person who I'm buying drugs from, I can't trust. And so he might know I can take this exact amount of this opioid and be okay. But he might not know that person that I bought it from is actually a dangerous person. And this could be laced with whatever else. And I might actually overdose unintentionally. I might know that if this is the right drug, that I could take this amount, but I don't know that person well enough to actually be able to make that judgment. And this is when it really hit me that I love working with this particular set of issues. it's not just the addiction. It's not just the grief. It's not just the depression or the ADHD or whatever else. It's the underlying autism that I find so fascinating, and trying to figure out how that autism actually has these tentacles in each one of these other things, and how all this stuff can come together to result in a really unproductive state for someone, that I find really fascinating. And I love getting to work with people.
It it must have been a loss for you when Open Sky closed because you were working there, right?
I,
When it
I
kind of
was. Yep.
and so when they announced their closure, you probably sat there for a little bit and said, "What am I gonna do?"
Yeah. I did. I did. I'm someone who doesn't sit for too long. I try to be pretty quick. It was like, all right, what do I want to do? And one of the things that I really learned at Open Sky and I loved about my time in the wilderness was just the impact of nature and the value of being outside, the value of kind of stripping away everything else that's going on and just being able to be alone with yourself and with your peers and with the environment. And so I knew whatever I was going to do, I knew I wanted that to be a component of it. One of the things that we do at Autism Learning Lab is we do family retreats where people come out and they spend a couple of days, they spend a 3-4 day period with us doing family therapy and doing it while we can also incorporate the outdoors and getting people out on a river or out on a hiking trail or up on a rock face, I think is such a profound way to come together, to build relationship, to learn about yourself. And it's a really cool way to integrate therapy. And so even though I'm not doing it all day, every day anymore, getting to do it even in these bits with people on retreats, I think is so important for me and something that I really want to bring to other people.
So you're integrating your work, the outdoor-based mental health treatment, and you have morphed wilderness therapy or outdoor behavioral healthcare into working specifically with neurodivergent. Is it young adults or all ages are you working with?
Adolescents and young adults. Yep. Yep.
And they come to you, and where are you located right now? I know you used to be near Durango. Are you in Durango area?
Still
Durango,
in the,
Colorado.
yes. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Still in Southwest Colorado. So I'm actually in a little town outside of Durango, high up in the mountains. So families come to me or to another one of our coaches, either up here. I'm in Silverton, Colorado. My other coaches are in Durango and the Durango area. So they'll come to us and spend 3-4 days with us doing family therapy and getting outside.
Wow. So you have a number of different coaches working at the Autism Learning Lab. Tell us a little bit about them and how did you get this group together?
So it's a lot of people that I worked with in the wilderness or who had been in the wilderness or kind of around the area. So a lot of them are people that I've worked with for a long time, people that I trust and have a lot of respect for, people who I know understand autism. Tried to bring in other people, tried to bring in new voices and perspectives as well. So trying to hire autistic people because I want an autistic voice or as many autistic voices as I can get on the team, because I think that is tremendously valuable, and wanting a mix of people that are good clinicians, but also people who are unafraid to do a session while on a hike, people who understand autism, people who understand family dynamics, really trying to get a well-rounded team.
And you design your program to be structured and unstructured. What are some of the biggest challenges that families face when navigating services for neurodivergent young people? And how does you and your team help them do that?
Yeah, it is a good question. It is really individualized. We try really hard to make sure that we're meeting whatever the individual and family is, meet them where they're at. What do they need? So we do a lot of virtual coaching. We do a lot of online coaching, both with parents and with individuals. And then we do the retreats as well. It is designed in a way that is meant to be bridging that gap. So I think a lot of people are really good at doing autism stuff. There's a lot of ABA therapists out there. There's a lot of people that can do the behavioral components of learning, like eye contact, for example, right? There's a lot of people that can drill that into your head. There's a lot of good therapists out there who can do the depression or the substance use or the ADHD. What we try to do, what our goal is finding the road that actually incorporates both of those lanes. And how can we work on your social competencies while we're also working on your social anxieties? And that is a tricky line to walk, because I think there's a lot of people who do one, a lot of people who do the other, not a lot of people who do both and do both well. So having the autism informed mental health coaching, I think it's tricky. It takes a lot of skill, it takes a lot of expertise, but it also allows us to say, okay, the presenting issue might be your anxiety and you haven't left the house in 3 weeks because you're so nervous. But why are you nervous? All right, let's work on something to calm your nervous system so you're actually in control of your anxiety. But now when you're out in the world, if you're just awkward and you don't actually like the way that you start conversations, or you find yourself just walking away from conversations all the time, you need to work on those skills too. So let's work on your how to regulate your anxiety, but then let's also work on the basics of conversation initiation. Let's work on how do you terminate or transition away from a conversation. Let's work on how to ask open-ended questions, how to answer, how to reciprocate in relationship. And let's practice those in real time in our sessions. Then let's give some assignments and goals to go out and do that, while we're also working on things that you can do to regulate your nervous system, because that's what's been holding you back and keeping you in your room for the last 3 weeks. And it's that balance of doing both those things at the same time that we really do try to hang our hat on and allow people to be able to do both the mental health stuff and the autism stuff at the same time.
That's it's a really unique program because you integrate the outdoors, you do coaching, you're including the family, you're providing a lot of different services to a specific population. I really like the model. How do you incorporate the outdoors into the treatment planning before or after a retreat session?
So there's a good amount of people that I'll work with that will do our coaching sessions on a walk virtually together. And you're going to open up Zoom on your phone. I'm going to open up Zoom on my phone, and we're going to walk together. We're going to stop. Hey, in 20 minutes, we're going to stop and we're going to look at each other, and then we're going to keep on walking. It is easy enough to do. Everyone has outside right out there. You don't have to be in the same place to actually be out in nature. We can be on this conversation together from across the country, from across the world, and we can both be outside together. Give a lot of assignments about especially like grounding techniques that are nature based. And so teaching people how to actually just focus on the weather and the temperature and going outside just to feel the temperature variation on your skin. So much of what a lot of autistic people really struggle with is that kind of that interoception, right? Understanding how does my body feel right now, which leads to a lot of alexithymia issues, right? Not necessarily understanding my emotional state. In order to build your emotional state awareness, a lot of times you need to build your bodily awareness. What's a good way to build bodily awareness? It's being outside. It's being in nature. It's understanding the weather. It's understanding exertion. It's understanding all those things that come with just being outside. You can do that anywhere. You don't have to have someone hold your hand to do that, but you need someone who's good at it and adept at it to actually guide you through the process. And so by going outside and understanding it's too hot out here for what I'm wearing, I need to take my jacket off. That's actually the same kind of bodily awareness that is going to be helpful, is to say, when I'm walking into a classroom or a meeting or work, I'm starting to feel nervous. It's the same thing, right? We're just paying attention to our body. Our skin's hot in one, our skin's hot in the other. Our heart's racing in one, our heart's racing in the other. It's just one of them, it's racing because it's hot outside and we've been running. The other, it's racing because I'm nervous. Can you learn to differentiate one of those versus the other? Because understanding your body at its core is the same process. And that's something that a lot of autistic people really struggle with. And that's something that being in the outdoors is really good at teaching.
Fascinating. It must be really rejuvenating for you because the intensity of wilderness therapy, young people were there anywhere from, I don't know, 2 months to 3 months, etc. And now you're diving in and coming out. Like Kurt Hahn from Outward Bound used to say, dunk 'em, dry 'em.
Yep.
And is it rejuvenating? Do you feel like, oh, this is good? I feel good about this.
This feels like
this is not what you wanted, right? You probably still want to work in wellness, but
yeah.
How does this feel for you, this new iteration of your career?
It's a good question, Will, and I appreciate it. And feel like I should pay you for a therapy session as I get into all of this. It's hard to lose wilderness. It's hard to lose something that's a huge part of my life. It's hard to lose something that I really believed in, and I still do believe in fully. I miss it. I miss sitting around fires. I miss being outside as much as I was. I miss going on a hike and seeing a bear and have that be something that really helps change someone's perspective. I don't miss the chaos and then everything being an emergency and you're meeting everyone on their worst day. That part is really challenging. And so this feels like a balance to me that is sustainable, is enjoyable, is profound in that we're helping people and changing lives, but does not have to be an all hands on deck emergency all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so I like it. I like the balance between being able to go outside with my clients and spend time with them on retreats, but also being able to be home at night with my wife and daughter. There is a lifestyle balance that I'm really appreciating. And there's still an element of it that I miss and that I think I'll always miss in a way.
Yeah, and this season, I'm particularly exploring the relationship between men and boys in the outdoors. And you certainly have had experience how nature uniquely impacts the mental health and development of boys and men personally and professionally. Can you share a story about that or share some of your insights? Because there is certainly a mental health crisis for men and boys, and I'd just like your thoughts about it because this season I'm really trying to illuminate it while not just focus only on that.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate it. And it's such an important question. And you're right, that crisis is pretty pervasive. Two things that I want to touch on with that. One that I saw just a tremendous amount actually in the wilderness is the camaraderie that boys really grow from. It's being on a team. It's working towards a superordinate goal. It is having the ability to accomplish something that's challenging that I think wilderness provides in such a unique and profound way. I can't tell you how many times I worked with a group of guys, work with guys who are men, adults, that have all sorts of life experience. They've been to college, they've been athletes, they've been in the military, but they've really struggled. They've struggled for whatever reason. And I think a lot of the struggle is, especially for the young adults that I was working with, is losing the identity that comes with being on a team and losing that feeling of we're working on something hard together. And I think wilderness can provide that in such a unique and amazing way. You get a bunch of guys together who don't really know each other, maybe don't even really like each other, but then you say, hey, you guys have to climb this mountain. You have to climb it together, right? It is such a great way to see dynamics play out. It's such a great way to see people learn about themselves, learn about other people, learn about their own insecurities, their strengths, their weaknesses. So many things come out when you put men together in a team and give them something good to accomplish. And the wilderness can do that in such a profound way. And the other thing that I see a lot of, and I see this a lot also now working at Autism Learning Lab and in our retreats, is just how profound getting into your body can be for a lot of guys. Working with a family here, it was during the winter, and going through some really tough family sessions, a lot of contention, teenage guy struggling to connect with mom and dad, a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing. So we did a bunch of family therapy, and then they went snowmobiling for 3-4 hours, and it got him out of his head and into his body in a way that was so important and so good for him. And he came back from it and he just had so much gratitude for the opportunity to be doing something challenging and unique and different and outdoors. And sat down with his parents then the next morning and just had a completely different outlook. And it's not because of anything I said. It's not because of anything that they did. It's just because we said, hey, here's some 8-foot deep snow and a big fast machine. Go romp through it and let's see what happens. And he did it, and he fell off and he got buried and he got back on and he kept going and he just had a ton of fun doing it. And he came back and he's like, that was awesome. And I feel proud of myself. And hey, we did this together as a family. And he then went through the rest of the retreat in a way that was much more self-aware, much more calm, much more engaged. It was all because he went out and got into his body. It was all because he went out and pushed himself in doing something challenging. And so I think wilderness really does provide so many things, and we could get further and further into the research there. But just like the visceral reactions that I have when I think about that question, especially, I think this is true for women too, but for guys especially, being in a team and then pushing their bodies, I think are really amazing ways that the wilderness can support men in working on mental health issues.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And the outdoors and being with a group of men or boys and working together on a project, and whether it's wilderness therapy or Boy Scouting or Outward Bound or Knowles, all those numbers are dropping. Recently, I had an episode out with the director of Knowles Risk Management, and she was just saying our numbers are down, and they've been down since COVID. And what they're finding is most of the young people are not interested in longer term semester programs where that
Yeah.
used to be their bigger programs. So there's a lot of different factors on why it is that less people are interested in outdoor experiences, whether you call it wilderness therapy or wilderness experiences or outdoor adventure or adventure therapy or just adventure experiences.
Right.
Though what the data showing short-term experiences like you just described, people come back and they're like charged up. And so that's a fascinating transition we're going through. And what are the factors? Probably explore that more in future episodes. But I'm wondering what kind of advice, because you're doing something really non-traditional. You came up with an idea, you were inspired, you were work with population. And if I'm correct, you used to work just with young adults, but now you're working with specifically with young people with this diagnosis. What sort of advice would you give a clinician or an educator who's exploring working with neurodivergent youth in kind of non-traditional ways like you're doing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the biggest thing, the thing that I come back to consistently is that if you've met one autistic individual, you've met one autistic individual. There is so much variation. There's so many different experiences. There's so many different goals. One of the things that I was thinking was starting this company and bringing this on is like, okay, I'm going to have like a set of things like will be the bedrock for most of our clinical work, right? Most people are going to do this. Most people are going to do this. Most people are going to do this, right? And having that kind of core idea. But what I realized pretty quickly is that like that does not work. Some people are going to need those things. Some people are going to need something completely different. And assuming that you're going to come in and say, I have a hammer and a screwdriver and I'm going to use my hammer like this and screwdriver like this, it just does not work. You need to be ready with a myriad of tools. You need to be ready to use them in unconventional ways. I think it is one of the more clinically complex treatment processes that people can go through. And it's one that takes, I think, a lot of just paying attention. And if you can pay attention and you can really see not just what am I being shown, but what's underneath all of that, that's what makes, I think, effective work with autistic youth or autistic young people or autistic people in general actually effective. And be open-minded. Don't think that I in no way call myself an expert on autism, even though I probably read more than the vast majority of people and I've worked with more autistic people than the vast majority of clinicians. I'm still a novice in so many ways because each person comes in is different. Each person is working on different things. Each person needs a different approach and a different tool. And so I think just the biggest thing, if you're working with autistic people, just be open, right? Be ready for anything.
Super cool. I completely agree with you. And you have a podcast. Can you tell us about your podcast? I will definitely have links to your podcast in the show notes.
I do. Yeah. Thanks, Will. It's the Autism Learning Lab podcast. And I meet with, work with, talk with so many profoundly well-educated, well-read experts in the field of autism. And I tried to think about like, how can I get all of this really great information to people? And I was like, how do I get a lot of information? I read a lot of articles. Okay. I'm probably unique in that. What else do people do? People listen to podcasts. Okay, let's start recording interviews with experts in the fields, not just interviews with experts, like experts on, say, digital media use and autism, right? Just the most recent episode that just published is with Tracy Markle, and she talked a lot about social media, digital media, all those things, and about how autistic people are especially drawn to it and especially negatively affected by it. Okay, so let's get that information out there. But then also, I want autistic voices and parents of autistic voices out there as well, because I think that hearing for an autistic person or autistic parent or a parent of an autistic kid to hear a voice of someone who's gone through something similar and is not necessarily coming out the other side of it, but has learned lessons and has things to share. I think that is so powerful too. And so the goal of Autism Learning Lab is to get the voices of experts out there and the voices of individuals who've actually lived the experience out there, because I know that those are the things that people can really learn from.
Well, where do you see the Autism Learning Lab evolving to, or do you have future plans for it nationwide? Are you going to do different retreats in different city centers? Because getting to Durango's not that easy. I've been there a couple of times.
No, we're in the middle of nowhere down here. Once you get here, it's lovely.
Oh, yeah. You want
there's
to stay like you. You never leave. But
exactly. Yep. There's no one else around, just you and mountains. And so you're absolutely right. I think that opening up the possibility of doing retreats in other areas. I know some people who are doing retreats in other places. So collaborating with them and using their spaces to do retreats in other places. All of our retreats are just one family. So there's the possibility. I've had some families say like, hey, can you meet us and we do a retreat somewhere? And that's something that we'll explore, and we're open to doing retreats for families in different places. And then the other thing that I really enjoy and that I'm doing more and more of is also doing trainings for programs, trainings for schools, trainings for organizations. There's a lot of people who want to improve their autism treatment. There's a lot of people who want to make their workplace or their school or their program more autism friendly or more supportive of autism. And so actually going in and doing trainings with programs in schools right now to teach their clinicians, their frontline staff, work with them on their systems to make sure that their systems are really designed and developed to support their autistic clients and autistic employees. And so that's something that I'm doing a good amount of now as well, something that I find really rewarding. I spend a lot of time training all of our staff at Open Sky, training our staff at Autism Learning Lab. So going in and training clinicians and staff in other programs is something that we're turning into as well.
Nice. And for you, Chris, as a man who started some business now, a father, a husband, how do you take care of yourself using the outdoors? Do you have a certain pastime, or what is it that right now feeds your soul in the outdoors?
I live, like I said, in this little town. It's at 9,300 feet. I hike from my back door every day, which I really love. My wife and daughter and dog. We hike every day just from our house. Was getting more and more into mountain biking, but my daughter broke her arm, so she can't mountain bike right now. So we're hiking. But we spend a ton of time camping, hiking, climbing mountains. My daughter's climbed more mountains as a 5-year-old than I can count, just because that's what we do here. And then a lot of skiing in the winter, a lot of just getting outside, enjoying all the nature that surrounds us here in Southwest Colorado.
Are you originally from Colorado? Where are you from originally?
I am. Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, so grew up climbing mountains and on the ski slopes and all that kind of stuff. So it's nice to be here.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic. And any upcoming conferences you're going to present at, or workshops coming online? Or are you taking the summer to reflect and enjoy all that you have up there in Durango?
Yep. Taking the summer right now to just a lot of retreats coming up, a lot of that kind of stuff. Going to submit to some more conferences here coming up. Probably next spring is where we'll start to present more. Presented a couple times this year, did the Wilderness Symposium, which is just a little bit ago, presented there on retreats as like a novel modality, which I think was a really fun one. And then presented at a conference internationally on autism treatment in the workplace, which I think was a really good experience earlier this spring too. So after those two presentations, it'll take a little bit of time and then we'll see what comes up next.
And how do people get in contact with you?
So you can go to autismlearninglab.com, fill out a form there. Those go to me and to my team. You can also email me, chris@autismlearninglab.com. I'm here to answer any questions and support however we can.
Chris, thank you so much for sharing your story on Stories from the Field.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.